Hey everyone, Zikry here again for another show of It Matters. It's been some time since we last saw each other, so I hope you guys are doing well. And as you can see, I'm in another different setting all the time, every time, wherever we have the show. But before we start today's specific topic, which I will reveal soon, or I guess you don't, I don't have to reveal, you already know it already, but I have to play a video which I really believe would benefit you out there. So watch this.
Welcome to Milieu Surveys, where your opinion counts. Stay updated on hot topics and latest trends with daily quizzes and surveys. Collect points and earn rewards. Join millions across the world for an insightful and rewarding experience. Download the app for free today.
So Milieu Insights is a app that you can all download and do surveys for free. And what happens is you will earn points, and these points can be redeemed for prizes, for electronic products, for even food or whatnot. But they are partnered with us in this specific show simply because Milieu Insights users now can donate their voucher, their points to Teach for Malaysia, which is one of our guests for today. So that is the reason why I wanted to share a bit of it, and it's a great way to create awareness. But without further ado, I'd like to bring our guests because they are anxiously waiting backstage. So let me bring on board Ken Ming, who is one of the thought leaders at TFM, Teach for Malaysia. Welcome to the show, Ken Ming.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Thanks, Zikry.
Everybody was expecting GCL, but
Chanson Singh.
yes,
Chanson Singh.
Singh.
My voice isn't as deep as his, but I think I'll do justice to speak about
It's
Teach
okay.
for
It's
Malaysia.
okay. I mean, Chansun Singh told me, he had to be on an emergency flight, so totally understandable. But I'm sure you are as good, or you're probably even better than him. Don't tell him I said that. And of course, the other person who's with us joining all the way from somewhere in Malaysia, truly Asia, we have Taufiq Zarak, a Malaysian politician, also an advocate for youth from the grassroots. Welcome to the show, Taufiq. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Zikri.
No. Thank you for joining us. Today is a very, very auspicious day simply because we all want to know how is our education system is at the moment. It's been the talk of the town, even pre-pandemic times. And it's no brainer to have the likes of the both of you to be on the show simply because we just want to figure out what are the standards, and what's really going on where the public don't really see. And it's such a refreshing to have two different key opinion leaders who could somehow articulate that for us. And I'd like to start and begin this conversation with Ken Ming. I know you've been with TFM for more than 12 years. Correct me if I'm wrong. I just want you to help the viewers out there to paint a picture of TFM's mission. What were the battles that you had to go through just to start, and what is the vision?
Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity. Also, just thank you for, I guess, hosting us and also us being a charity that people can donate to today. I think that's really encouraging for us to know that there are opportunities for people to contribute. And so I think I won't go too much into a story, but I think generally the vision of Teach for Malaysia really hopes to see that children, regardless of their background, have access to quality education, the opportunity to realize their potential. And I think we started back in 2010, where our former CEO, Zamir Zulkifli, met up with another person at a mamak store, just complaining about education, talking about what could be better. And I think very similar to the kind of chats we're having today, like, what do we feel on the grassroots levels? And they thought, what could we do as young people to really inspire hope in the next generation? And I think as they started Teach for Malaysia, one of the big missions that we think about is really how do we develop a movement of leaders that are passionate about solving issues in education. And I think over the last 12 years, or 10 plus years, we've developed a movement of leaders in many different spaces, both teaching in school, and some have gone on to start social enterprises. But ultimately, I think we want to see our education system continually transforming, and we need the talent to be able to do that. So I think that's a bit about Teach for Malaysia's longer term vision.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Now, Taufik, you've been on I would say, I don't know if it's a crusade or not, in a very halal way, as I put it. Um, what from your birds, from your eyes, your sets of eyes, you've been on the ground for quite some time, especially advocating the youth in various spectrum of their lives, from and I think you're the best person to sort of also paint a picture about the educational disparities, if any, or
Mm.
if not, maybe people are too ignorant to address them out in the open, saying there is a problem here. So, um, how how are you bridging this divide? For example, I think a lot of people in KL who have a bit of money, they want to send all of their kids to private school.
Mm.
That's like the common norm. Everyone talks about it. I would say 98% of the time they would talk about it. But is it that bad?
Thank you, Zikri. So I think let me start by saying that first thing first, I really like in our headline of our conversations, which is our equity in educations. Oftentimes, a lot of people kind of like they thought that equality. They are talking about the equality and all that, but bear in mind that equality doesn't mean justice. Equity is. So it is a matter of bridging the gap of opportunities. It's a matter of giving everyone with the same opportunities and the same platform that especially and where we talk in Malaysia's in Malaysia where every one of us deserve to have um, the same opportunities and the same right, because education is a very basic right for all of us. And then I think it's very important, regardless your backgrounds or regardless of
Mm.
any other families backgrounds or even a financial status, your social status. So education is very very important and very very basic rights for all of us. To answer your questions, um, it is actually a very what do you call it, very concerning. I'm
Mm.
not saying that it's wrong, but it just, I
Right.
mean, to be talking about if let's say one family, if this family can afford to give a better education for the child, then why not? And at the same time, what about is that mean that our education system is not good, or is that mean that our education systems is not as standard as the other education platform or education system that they are looking to it? So a lot of things that we need to improve, a lot of things that we need to make sure that there is equal opportunities to everyone. A lot of things also in terms of our education systems that need to be transformed in that manner, because we have been independent for more than 60 years, and at the same time our education system are just kind of like stagnant over the years.
Mm.
So with regards of new players coming in, our experts and the changing of the situation, environment, technology even, so we need to be able to adapt. The education system need to be able to adapt and also make it more uh, 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 enhance or to give it to everyone at the equal manner. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. I totally understand that, and thank you for clarifying on what is the equity of our education, especially in the
Yeah.
eyes of Malaysia. Yeah. Yes,
My,
Ken. Awesome.
mind if I just build a little bit? I love the couple of points on equity specifically, and for
Yeah.
me, if I think about opportunities, right, and I think about equity, I also think that
Mm.
a higher level of resources need to go to the places that need it the most, right? So it's not just about everyone having an equal chance, but also thinking about how are certain people at different starting lines. And I think recently there was a thing about starting a school for the hardcore poor, and I think definitely there's a lot of thought around like how do we really create strong structures that enable students regardless of their
Mm.
background to be able to thrive, right? Because if we just put a bar of like, okay, only those who get 10 A's will get a JPA scholarship, then a poor student is disadvantaged in many different ways because they don't have access to tuition, they come from challenging backgrounds because their families don't earn enough, and so they can't focus focus as much as maybe a student from a slightly better background. So when I think about equity, I think about how do we allocate resources in a way that really puts students on an equal playing field. And I think the urgency, as I think about it, the urgency is not so much like, oh, we've been doing a terrible job and all that. I don't really like to play the I don't know whose fault is it kind of game, but I
Yeah,
think
the beginning
the
game, right?
urgency is really about like the world is changing really
mm,
rapidly. And our students are falling behind, and there are two main things that are happening. Right, one is the pandemic has an increasing long-term effect on students. The you know the more we wait, the more we're not addressing it. There are lots of different challenges, right? Some students, the disparity that we saw during the pandemic is that some students struggled with learning because you didn't have quality, stable internet or device. Some students didn't go to school at all for a
mm,
year or two, right? And I think some research around the pandemic that happened in Nepal kind of saw that a few months of students not being in school amounted to actually years of them being left behind. And now worldwide, we're facing that issue of learning loss, right? Um, and I think that together with the rapidly changing digitization of the world, I think there's a huge thought around how are we preparing students for a future that is that AI is going to take over millions of jobs, that the landscape of menial work or even kind of blue collar work is changing as well, that we need knowledge creators, we need people who are critical thinkers to be leading the workforce, and a question of whether our students are at the level that they can actually be competitive. And I think Malaysia is an interesting example of we have some of the smartest people around getting into the
yeah.
Yales, the Harvards, becoming, I don't know, consultants worldwide, but also we have students that can't read and write. And so that
Mm,
Of course.
disparity is really what we observe in this equity gap now.
No, definitely. I think a lot of things that you touched on were very very relevant. Not only that, it's some of that you said, like with AI and all these are new problems that will
Yeah.
probably build up what the backlogs of problems that we've been facing. So I think one of the this is pretty difficult to talk about, but
Mm,
the
go
racial
for it.
disparity, for example.
Ooh. Okay.
Oh, I'm not supposed to really say it open, but come on, let's be real.
Yeah.
Uh, how
Yeah.
is that like? We have two different point of views here. You have one from TFM. You've been on the ground for a very long time. You've been seeing it, all the way from um, Borneo side to Peninsula side. And the one thing that I like to see that is I like to hear on your daunting challenges when it comes to equity of education through the lens of race. How what do you know that you could share with us on real face value here, rather than trying to make
Mm,
it sound like it's not really a big deal. But is it really? So
yeah.
and then I'll come back to you, Taufiq, because there's something more interesting
Mm.
I like to touch on. So Ken.
More interesting than race. Okay. uh, so I think it's a huge topic, but I mean, if you ask me honestly and personally, I don't have a lot of statistics around it, but I actually don't think there's a huge divide when it comes to like primary and secondary education. And when I think about schools, government schools, having access to doesn't matter whether you're Malay, Chinese, Indian, Sabahan, and all that. Actually, I don't see that much of a divide, and I think it becomes a lot clearer when we, well, in terms of like I don't know, certain quotas that we have in universities or even opportunities for scholarships. That's where the disparity gets a bit clearer. But at a school level, like I think most government schools are open access to all, and I think maybe the challenge there is not necessarily a racial issue, but actually sometimes a geographical issue as well, right? Where
Okay.
I don't know, states like Sabah and Sarawak will experience, and it's not necessarily a race thing, but it's also just like uh, allocation of resources, whether schools remain dilapidated or whether you have access to high quality teachers that are really wanting to teach there long term, whether they have access to teacher training. There's lots of different things to think about there. Um, so yeah, with when you first kind of said it for me is like poverty and illiteracy knows no skin color. because you can be
Yeah.
Chinese and really poor and illiterate, and you can be Indian and really poor and illiterate, and Malay similarly. So I think that from that lens, I don't really see a huge difference from a secondary and primary school level, but
Okay.
definitely more so when we're thinking about scholarships and university entries now.
Mm.
Okay, understood. What do you think about that, Tawfiq? Because I think I can relate to what you're saying, Ken. Because
Mm,
Mm.
primary school levels, there's you don't hear much. I
mm,
versus the moment they go to high school, um,
mm,
and then again onwards to college. That's when the real it's so hard to talk about these guys, but but
Yeah.
that's when
mm,
the real deal happens. Like people are saying, oh, a straight A student because I'm a different race, I can't get it because there's a quota, blah 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 blah. I don't know how if it really does affect the work that you guys do at TFM because
mm,
the whole um, reassurance that TFM is doing is to ensure the quality education for no matter where they are, even the rural
mm,
areas. I've seen your work. Um,
mm,
but then if you go on the other side where people are advocating for your behalf, let's say
mm,
our brother here, Taufiq Zarak here.
mm,
I mean, on your side, Taufiq, when you go on the ground, when you go and try to talk to students or I guess the youth, from your particular party, it's very inclusive, and that's I think very very um, very refreshing in that sense. But are there any unfiltered, raw impact stories that you could share of being on the ground, not just in KL? I'm sure there's,
Mm.
the coalition is, the parties is trying to advocate and empower the youth from all around
Yep.
the country. What do you hear from them coming, because we're not talking from someone who has went to school and then is giving feedback to school. Now we're talking to a real person of what they've experienced as a student. What were their challenges, and
Mm.
was there really a racial problem, and is it the root of all of the cause of all these little backlog problems that we just kind of discussed?
Right, right. I mean, I agree. I agree with Ken also. Like we don't have really much problem when it comes to secondary level schools, and even in fact, a lot of Malay students go to SJKC
Yeah.
schools and whatnot, right? And then they are exchanging right after that. But the real problem or the real challenge that we have is once after you enter to college, it's not because of race per se, but indirectly it that's the reason. The main question or the main problem here is we call it a quota, you see.
Mm.
So when you wanted to enter one particular universities or a public universities, that's where a quota comes in, that you need to fill up a certain quota. And that's where that's the real problem. I have when I go to the ground and I ask the youth, or even I even have my youngest one of the young friends who are still studies, the non-Malays, they were kind of like, told me that I have a good results to be compared with my other Malay friends. This person is a non-Malay, and then at the same time, I also wanted to apply for public universities, but I cannot get it because
Mm.
because there are some certain reason to that. But my friends who are a little bit lower the marks between me, and then they get the chance, or they get the enter into a public college. So for the non-Malays, or even for this particular group, they kind of like, I don't have a choice to look for a private universities, and for private, I need to it's very expensive. I need to look for my own jobs to cover it and to help a little bit with my families and whatnot. So that's where the real problems comes in, and that's something we are really really heavily uh, telling that you see it's no reason to put a quota in, or
Mm.
even if we talk about scholarships, even the scholarships also is not giving a real or equal justice to even the one particular race that can be benefit from that scholarships. Let's say, for example, if one scholarships has put a certain numbers to give it to the Malays, but at the same time, it's not all applicants that are really need that scholarships get that scholarships. You get what I mean? They will give to a certain group of people. They will give to a certain, you see, a certain numbers of students that they know, and then we know that some of them, they are, more than afford to pay their own school fees. So
Mm.
it also doesn't fit the purpose when you put scholarships there. But at the same time, that's the real situation or the real challenge that we have, where the systems itself must be transparent enough to know and to see, to be able to grant at this one particular person, that you apply for scholarships. You need to make sure that you check all of the boxes, especially that this scholarship will help you and your families, or will help you to have a better educations, because of your because of your families, because of you can't afford to pay for school fees, and at the same time you have a good results, right? So that's the opportunities that we really want to make sure that the transparency must be there. The systems also must be very strict to know that you give one scholarships to one person, which is this one person is really someone that really need it, other than oh yeah, okay, I can afford actually to pay, but if I can get the scholarships, then why not? That is not right. Yeah.
I feel you, man. I feel you, and thank you for elaborating it much deeper and linking how quota is actually down
Mm.
to the system itself. How often do we know that these quota changes? Do they? What is
I,
the?
I feel there's no visibility. There's
Mm.
yeah, I mean, nobody really knows, right? We know
Yeah.
there's a quota, we know there's certain entries, but
Okay,
I
hold on,
yeah,
hold on. You're saying we do it. This the quota is not publicly made available for the people to know, or is that what you're saying?
I'm not aware. I don't know if they intentionally or unintentionally, but I don't think specifically aware of whether there are certain percentages or anything specifically. I mean, higher education is not really an area that we look into too
Of
much,
course,
but
of
Mm.
yeah.
course.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not publicly tells to the rest of us that we need, the quota has been set up for a certain percentage, or the quota has been set up for a certain numbers that should be granted. No, yeah.
No, no, of course. And
Mm.
speaking of this conversation, we had a lot of people. So we had a few questions. I think one of them we already touched on it already, based on the inequality of race.
Mm.
And then we kind of addressed it a bit, and the both of you have agreed that this is down to the system that is revolving around this quota. That's when this disparity is one of the causes of it. And then we have a question from Eric again. He's asking you, Ken, with AI influencing education more and more, what do you think this will do to the disparity as discussed, and how are you going to address it as TFM?
Mm. Wow, that is a very future-oriented question. Appreciate you being really engaged, Eric. Continue asking questions. And so AI, I think it's a tool. There's two camps, obviously, and most of the time there's a camp that's very fearful of, I don't know, Terminator Doomsday. There's also, a group of people that are really excited of all the possibilities in AI. But when I think about it in education, I think it comes down to maybe a couple of things, like how will AI change the landscape of the workforce, and what does that mean for how students need to be educated or how they need to grow and develop. Because if AI can kind of like do a lot of the basic level thinking, you key in something to GPT, it can probably write like half your assignment for you, right? So then actually what students need to be then thinking and growing is really building that critical thinking, building that level of being able to piece information and know like how to um, you know do good prompts and put things together. But I think the disparity part comes actually not so much with AI, but actually with access to technology. And that currently in Malaysia is still a huge thing. So during the pandemic, I think it was like 40% of students across the country, especially in urban areas, had no access to any sort of like device or even stable internet, and
Oh,
probably didn't participate in education. And so if we think about what that impact has on their ability to become a digital citizen or even know how to use a computer or the internet, I think that kind of places a huge number of students just as internet consumers, right? They
right.
probably have a bit of internet on their phone, they know how to TikTok here and there, but then they don't really know how to use digital skills or really like adapt to this changing environment. So whether it's programming or whether it's knowing how to use basic things like Excel, I think that would put students at quite a disadvantage because if I then think about the workforce, if you know how to use basic Microsoft, there are certain jobs that you can get. If you don't know how to access a computer, you're left to like a bit more blue collar, bureau type work, right?
Yeah.
So it really creates a bit of a disparity. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for answering that. I hope that answers your question, Eric Von Elster. I'm guessing you're not Malaysian, but he's been on the show
Could
many
be.
times. So,
Mm.
uh, but back to the narrative, like we've already covered the quota, the system. The system seems like the guy on top, I guess. But to curb the system, in order to how to keep giving feedback to it so that it can improve itself. We have, like I said, like you guys both from two different side of the coin. One is really on the ground with public schools, and I'm referring to TFM, and then you have Alberta Taufiq, who is literally empowering youth to the message that you bring to the table so that it resonates with them. um, do these feedbacks that you hear ever um, taken seriously? And if they do, in the past 10 years, have you seen any changes in that sense? And I'd like to hear more from, again, from Ken, because, you are also the Director of Community and Mobilization. So obviously
Mm.
you are very much in touch with mobilizing the mini programs, the modules, knowing the students, and you probably have tons of data. Am I right? And these data should be fed at some point where the ministries or government agencies should take notice. Has there been any improvement? And if there is, could you honestly share that with us?
There's tons and tons of data, definitely. I think particularly in education, um, the hardest bit, so the most immediate data that's usually very easy to track is improvement of test scores. But I think, as a nation, or even the government has made, I guess, a bold move in the past decade or so to really move away and really try to move the whole system away from like exam orientedness. So I think when I was teaching in school in 2012, there was Pentaksiran Berasaskan Sekolah, which they tried to do. They kind of implemented school-based assessments, and now where that's evolved to, I think that has kind of changed as well to now having what they call like a TP level system. So there are evidences that students have to demonstrate a certain level of achievement, right? Which is the higher order thinking skills versus like lower order or more basic knowledge skills. Um, so I think there are good shifts in the system that we've definitely seen.
Okay.
But I do think as a whole, I think society or the world is evolving at a much faster pace than education is.
Right.
Um, and so just the pace of like our classrooms, I mean, technology is at this point where you can virtually learn anything just in front of a computer, but our classrooms are still fairly textbook heavy, fairly teacher centered or teacher oriented or teacher based, right? And the role of a teacher, I mean, don't even talk about the salary of a teacher. I wish the salary of a teacher would have gone higher in the last 20 years, but the role of a teacher also hasn't evolved greatly. And, it's still very much as a sharing knowledge and education and really planning out lessons. And also there's lots of different burdens that we've seen teachers kind of take up, right? So if I were
Yeah.
to say kind of on a macro level, I don't know if it's evolved fast enough. But if I kind of see specifically in Malaysia, I kind of see a widening equity gap, right? So as a whole, I think parts of the system is definitely achieving really, really strong results. We have more and more students, in a sense, going to university, but at the other end, we also have more and more students kind of not going to university, or sorry, dropping out, and not completing SPM. And so there is the 20% on each side that's kind of increasing. Um, and so I think that's the worrying part, right? Because as a whole, you can kind of shout about, oh, these amazing parts of the system, but then there are also, parts of Malaysia where access to education is still very difficult. Um, I think
Okay.
on the ground, some of the things that we have been seeing, I think whether it's infrastructure, I think things have changed. Schools being built, access to orang asli education. I think in different parts, language, English language has, in some sense, been improving in some areas. But I yeah, it's really hard to say if we are keeping up with the times, and whether, so if I say like we have prepared students now, but students now are actually prepared the same way that they were like 10 or 15 years ago, then actually students are behind, right? Because they're coming out. And I think the biggest gap that we're seeing, when students finish education, is that their global competitiveness is not as high as, we'd want to, right? And so I think there are some reports. I can't remember if it's from the World Bank or something, where, in Malaysia, typically we'd finish 12 years of education, but as we come out, it's kind of equivalent to about 9 years. If I compare to
Mm,
like Singapore, or if I to compare to like other nations, right? So Malaysian students would come out same age, but we're kind of lacking in terms
Oh,
of, the level of critical thinking. So we've
yeah.
gotten some of the basics right, but there's still a level to be challenged, right? To go a little bit further, to start innovating and to start, leading in specific fields. So
Now,
yeah,
hold on to that thought. Now
yeah,
that you're discussing this specific moment, I just also want to remind the viewers, for those who are watching, there's a donation button on the bottom there, where if you feel that you want to do something about this and try to understand how you can make a difference, there's a donation button down here on your Immerse TV platform right now where you can donate, and all donations will go directly to TFM for their hard work and their way of trying to move mountains for the future of this country, which is, of course, the education of our kids. Now, I'm going to go back to Taufiq for a minute, because there's another conversation that we also keep hearing, and that is, within this topic, of course, the equity gap, that, just like you mentioned, Ken. Now, is there an equity gap with the quality of our teachers? You mentioned, Ken, that I can see your face already, but you mentioned, Ken, that there's a 15 or maybe 20 years lack of behind on in terms of catching up with trying to cope with modern times. But when we look at our teachers, is this something also that we? This is part of the reason why a lot of people don't want to put their kids, those who have a bit of um, leeway, into public schools, because everyone keeps talking about the quality of our teachers. Teachers are not really being teachers; they're just very, I guess, robotic, just doing what they think is best. There are also reports on this is when I was in one of the talks at TFM years ago, about the teachers that's been recruited are usually people who are not of the best when it comes to their academics and in terms of um, their qualification as well, because it was the only job that they could do that involves with the government. Um, and I wanted to see where your mind and your opinion is on this topic, because again, like, you're from a different focus when it comes to talking to the youth on the ground, and I'm sure there's plenty of cases that you've been hearing, and that you're advocating, and we see that all the time with your in the leadership of your party leader. So where do you see with this, and do you also see there are been changes, improvements to be that's being made at the current moment?
there always been a changes with regards especially with the environment and then the technologies or even the new generations comes in, the way that teachers need to treat the students now is different when the teachers need to treat back then, right? So
Yeah, yeah.
so the approach is different, the way you need to talk to the students also is different, and all sorts of stuff where the teachers nowadays, I mean, has off with all of the teachers out there. They are more patient, they need to be a little bit more, to be catch up with the technology. Sometimes students, they are more advanced than the teacher itself, and then sometimes the best part, I mean, from where I can see it with the current generations that we have right now, because of the technologies are so rapidly growing, and then this can kind of like making the students itself be mature enough in terms of the way of their thinking. Let's
Right.
say if one issues happening, and then they keep asking questions with towards the teachers, and that's where the teachers need to make sure all of the questions are answered, and at the same times all of the syllabus will be delivered as per schedule and whatnot. So the teachers nowadays, despite of they need to changing in terms of the way that they approach or the way that they need to teach, and at the same times it also need to be able to adapting or uh, uh, putting some technologies kind of a machine behind it. Let's say for example, when I can see some of the teachers who are really patient, to teach to the students, and then they put as part of their content to show that this is how the teachers need to teach the students, and the syllabus is different, the way that the approach is different. So a little more creative thinking, and the teachers are way more thinking out of the box in terms of how you need to make sure that the syllabus or the educations, the knowledge has been transferred very very well to the students. That's number one. And number two, I just would like to add on a little bit from what Ken said. In terms of the standards that we have right now, yes, it's a little bit. I think it's not the same with the current market that we have. We are taking more times, few years additionals, and that's what we are trying to say, that when you're taking a degree, you can just finish it off maybe less than 4 years, to be compared with other countries, why you need to take a full 4 years, 5 years, 6 years. And then when you reach out to a certain level of age at the same time, and that's too late for you to to get experience in the corporate level, in the corporate environment. And at the same times, that are kind of a standards that we always need to make sure that it must be changed, and it must be transformed in the right manner, which is when the market says that these are the skills, or skills that we need. That's where the education systems or the knowledge itself must be able to in line with the market that we have right now. Another examples that I can put is that um, we need to make sure that the students, especially in the college, the university students, they need to be ready
Yeah.
themselves to put out there when you enter into a corporate sectors, right? um, in terms of how you the way you solve any problem solving skills, creativity thinking, and all of that skill set is very important, and that's where you need to learn and evolve yourself during the school's time, during the college times, and from there, that's where you need to make sure that you are ready when you are out there, finish up your degree or whatnot, and then you put out there to make sure that the sectors, the economy, or let's say any corporations that will be, that you are the right person for that particular corporations. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm.
there's a lot of
I,
samples coming up from. Yes, you want to say something, Ken?
Mm,
yeah, I think the interesting, this is a little bit more on the higher education side, but I do feel there is a bit of a disadvantage for like a public university student. If let's say you do an STPM 2 years, you wait for a
mm,
placement, and then you do 4 years in university. So when you get out, you're what, 24.
Yeah.
Like I, recognizing my own privilege, right? I graduated at 21 and started working in 21. I did a 3-year American degree program, and came out when a lot of my peers that had done STPM or went to a public university came out like 3 or 4 years later.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that you're not even doing like a medical degree, right? You're just doing a basic degree, and you'd come out at 24. And from a, I don't know, opportunity cost perspective, especially if you're coming from a challenging background, those are years, right, that you're not earning and not providing for your family, that you are living off, whether it's a scholarship or a grant. So I do feel that's something that we do need to think about. Firstly, is thinking about why that happens. Is there no underway? Because sometimes in Malaysia, it's like status quo, you just don't question it and like just jalan lah, right? And I do feel we need to question, like, is there faster ways, right? And as I think about that, that is still the tertiary degree kind of like access pathway. I feel with the changing landscape of education, and also the job market, there's going to be a lot of different types of pathways that students can take, right?
Yeah.
One small example is you could do a coding course for 6 months and get a probably a 4 or 5 thousand job as a programmer, mainly because the world's just so short of programming and coding people. And
Mm.
do
Yeah.
you really need an IT degree? So I feel that landscape is changing, and I do
Okay.
feel students, yeah, can take
Now,
advantage of
Yeah.
that.
yeah.
A little
Sorry,
bit,
guys.
a little bit, yeah,
Real
a
quick.
little bit, Zikri. I mean, I agree with Ken as well. As for myself, if let's say, as for myself, I finish up my SPM. I think kita habis SPM 18, if I'm not mistaken, if I can remember, at the age of 18. And then after SPM, I take my diploma for 3 years, 18, 19, 20, 21. At the age of 21, I started working already, and then I took my degree part time. So I have my classes every weekends and all that, just to catch up the timing, the at the age that I feel that at the age of 25, 26, I feel I'm very old in order for me to put in the corporate sectors already. So and I lost a few years, from 21 to 25, a few years I lost to gain experience in a working experience, rather than, I need to sit for the full time course. So that's why I'm taking a part-time course, and then at the same time I'm also working in the corporate sectors. So these are the part of the challenging, if let's say the current status quo that we have right now. And one of the way that I'm doing it, and imagine for the people out there, you just finish your degree at the age of 25, 26, and that's why you need to start it to look for a job. Is you 20, over 20 years, you're
Mm,
half age already.
mm,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I want you guys to just hold on this thought that this, because it's getting very much interesting now, because and there's a root to it on why this is keep
Mm.
going, and I'd like to
Mhm.
touch on that. But before we further our discussion, a bit of word from our partner from Milieu
Sponsor.
Insights.
Sponsor.
Do you think your opinion matters? Would you like to inspire change? Welcome to Milieu Surveys, where your opinion counts. Join in on hot button topics. Stay updated on the latest trends. Take daily quizzes and surveys. Track your progress and level up to stay ahead. Collect points and earn while you learn. Milieu Surveys, the app for an insightful and rewarding experience. Join millions across the world and be part of something bigger. Understanding what's going on around you just got simpler. Download the app for free today.
All right, guys, we're back. For those who haven't heard about Milieu Insights, now you know what it does. The opportunity now is, if you download the app now, you can actually donate your points to TFM. Other than that, we have a donation button down here on the immerse.tv, just specifically for this It Matters show. Show some love, give some love, do some love, give it all out, and see what else you can do, and support our amazing organization, Teach for Malaysia. Now back to what we're talking about now, because now it's getting more interesting, simply because all the samples that I'm hearing, from the both of you, it goes back to the root of who controls what, who says what we should be teaching, and how the system should be. Um, and I feel for you, man, Taufiq, because when I saw that, when I heard diploma took 3 years to
Yeah.
finish before you can enter degree, for me it doesn't make sense, to be honest. And I'm speaking this openly with the good intention to kind of
Yep.
share my opinion, just in case if someone's trying to cancel me out. The diploma itself, like, because a lot of people are just skipping it from when the moment they finish school nowadays. And I think, Ken, you can also back me up on this. Everyone's going for the gig economy now. Everybody wants to become
Mm,
make a bit of
Grab
money.
driver.
Yeah,
Yeah.
a Grab driver or any kind of way they can
I
make
mean,
them.
if I think about just instant gratification, if a job that I can immediately do now is going to pay me 3, 4 thousand, why would I go and do a degree, right? So
Mm.
Yeah,
I'll drive a cab, I'll send food, right? And the main issue is that when I'm 30 and 40, I don't
Mm.
have the experience to really push my salary to
no,
upward social mobility, and that's the
no.
challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great thing, if I see it
Mm,
that way. And there were other routes, of course. If you can't do a diploma, you do a foundation, which is also 4 year. But then
Yeah.
it's slightly difficult to get in sometimes, unless you have
Yeah.
the money. You can go to all these private universities. I'm being real, guys.
True.
you know
True. True. Completely
I
agree
I
with you.
am recognizing my privilege. I mean, I do come from a slightly more privileged background, and I mean, thinking back, it's definitely not easy for a lot of people to
yeah,
immediately, go to think about university. And I think a lot of the students that we teach, it's actually not the first thing on their mind, right? So the first thing on their
no,
mind is just going out to work, right? And it's
yeah.
almost like only the lucky ones go to university in a lot of circumstances.
Mm.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, from your lens, Ken, I think you can
Mm,
definitely see, like we say budak-budak bandar yang selalu dapat pergi universiti, and then we
mm,
have those who are not really like just like you said, who are not privileged enough. They have to work, they have to go the much more difficult route that we also sometimes take for granted. But again, what enables us to keep this kind of tradition or this merit of how you should be going through the specific process of the letter for you to be able to have a degree and work these days. It boils down to how the system puts in play. And I'm not trying to say that that's the reason why the problem exists, but there must be um, there must be some explanation why we are not trying to, like you said, Taufiq, to be at the standard where most of the market worldwide is. Like for example, in Australia, you have a gap year to take, or
Mm.
for in the US, if you can't go do a diploma, you go to a community college for 2 years, and then you can finish the other 2 years in the university. Very standard. At the same time, they encourage you to do work and whatnot, and stuff. So if you really ask me on how this equity of education is, it's still living in the past, and I don't see what benefits it can do. And I'm not talking on the lower educations. I'm talking about the higher education side now, because
Mm.
that's what we kind of discuss. I don't see any problem with the lower ones. It's how when they make that jump to the next level. That's when, as the consensus wise, we discussed about it earlier. That's where the disparity starts to kick in, not really on the primary and high school. It's what they do after that. For example, like learning how to save money or using apps that
Mm.
will allow
Yeah.
for you, these are real application that could be very useful for someone that's not really taught. Like another thing, like I literally have a book right here. It's called Life's a Pitch. Because
mm,
we don't teach kids how to pitch, for example, because
Mm.
that's the main driver of any human being out there when they want to survive in the real world. You have to be able to sell yourself. If you're a politician or if you're a businessman, that's like one of the main asset. So a lot of these key elements here are still, I feel, or I mean, I know it's missing. So now for the both of you, we've heard really great, a lot of things to have learned from what you have shared from the beginning of the show. Um, for you, Tawfiq, like your role of advocating is inevitably it leads to a change that will impact the landscape of this country, right? Um, why is it so difficult to? Is it because people up there are stubborn, or is it because it's just safe? Do they not know the implications of not trying to cope with the changes that all our neighboring countries are working on? And like, and there's also some discussion like there should be just one school, and I'm not going to go through that because that's a lot of a lot of discussion. We can talk about that for hours for maybe the next few months. But back to the basics. Why aren't these changes really happening faster? Because
Mm.
another thing that maybe I'll come back to you, Ken, is maybe teachers shouldn't be teachers; they should be facilitators now, because everyone's learning everything from all the social media that's been sharing, depending on what content they're seeing, right? So, I want to go to you first, Tawfiq, on
Yeah.
why is the system taking its time?
That's the reality, Zikri. That's the reality that all of us need to face, where the change is not moving fast as what we thought. However, I think that's why we need to be creative enough to figure out on how need to make sure that we are up there, up to the standards, and we are ensuring that there will be a lot of platforms out there. We, I mean, we, as much as we hope that the systems need to be changed, maybe for the next 5 or next 10 years, but the reality is not going to be that fast. Back I think that's a matter of questions, where whether you have a strong political will or not. If you have a strong political will, I'm very sure that nothing uh, uh, nothing is impossible. Everything can be done, and then everything can up to a very fast pace. However, the reality is not like that. So what we can do, that's why all of us, I think, basically we need to be creative enough to disrupt the system. Not to say that to disrupt the whole education system or whatnot. It's just that to disrupt the way we live, and to disrupt the way we get our educations. um, I give you an example. As what the technologies has been growing very rapidly, YouTube is one of the platform that is called a free education. So if you want to go, or if you want to learn something, let's say if you want to learn how to save money, you can just go to your YouTube, and then you can then learn from it. If you want to go for a coding and whatnot, you can get a gist or a basic out of that from YouTube even. So that is one of the way to disrupt the current systems, to make sure that the platform are out there, the platform are already out there, and just a matter, or just a questions that individual are willing to learn or not. My worries, or what I want trying to advocate a lot to all the youngsters, that you need to make sure that you have an openness, or you have the interest to learn.
Hmm.
Because a lot of us, when a lot of youngsters, they choose to be in the gig economy, they are started to focus a lot of making more money, you see. So in the next 5 years, tak apa. What about in the next 10 years? What about in the next 15 years? You're going to have your
Yeah,
family soon, right? And
of
you're going to have your own commitment. So you can't just, like Ken said, we can't be in that level of salary for the just for the next 5 or for the next 10 years.
course.
That's where it hits you, that you need to think creatively, you need to do it differently, where first, the education is very, very important. That's why you need to start, must be up and willing to learn. Understand that you can't take full 3 years, 4 years degrees and whatnot, but that's where a lot of platforms out there, a short course, a crash course and whatnot. At least you have that kind of advantage to learn something that you want to learn, and you can use it and you can apply it very well, and that's where you can meet yourself to meet up the demand from the corporate. Yeah.
So I just wanted to interject, Tawfiq,
Mm.
because we do have a very um, a question here by MK, who happens to like lavenders, because I can see the profile photo is a lavender. But she has two questions. But I think the question that she really wants to ask is, she apologizes that this is quite a sensitive question, but I think it's for you, Tawfiq, to address this. But do you believe government policies and decisions are generally made for the interest of the people or for themselves? Because many of us, I think she's referring to her and her group of peers that she represents, many of us are jaded. And if those
Mm.
in power were really serious, we would have seen improvements by now. But we continue to fall behind. What would you say to
Mm.
that?
I That's the reality. I mean, let's say for example, right? all of us, I think a lot of us go for public schools, but at the same time, those people out there who are, you know, the lawmaker, we call it, the lawmaker, the families, or even himself, or they are not from the public schools. Even they
Mm,
even send the families out there, not from the public schools. So these are the people that, advocating or changing the laws for us, but at the same time you are not feeling, or you are not experiencing like all of us. So that's why
mm,
I feel it's not really, if they just wanna make sure that the policy that you introduce, or the law that you introduce, for the benefit all of us, for all of us Malaysians, but at the same times it's not really impactful, or it's not really meet or solve the problem that we have.
mm.
Just taking for another example, how many times that we need to keep changing mathematics and science in English. Sekejap in English, and then after that sekejap in bahasa. So what's the relevance in that,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
why you need to keep changing? Where and the you know we are the victims. The students are the victims. You
right.
see, like this year is you're gonna have a last syllabus in English, and then next year you need to teach, you need to learn math and science in bahasa. So that's where I mean I agree with you, where there are some level, they are just merely a popular decisions, but at the same time it's not really solving a problems, people's issues that relate to education. Yeah.
That's thank you so much, Tawfiq, for that explanation, and I hope I helped. I agree with you, man. Like one of these guys who are in member of parliament, who are supposedly trying to advocate change. They have their kids also in private school because they have the
Mm.
money. But also, Ken, the same person is asking another question because I think this is more in line with TFM's work because she's asking, are you hopeful about the future of education in Malaysia, specifically
Mm.
public schools?
Mm.
Or will it get even more polarized?
I am an optimist. I, I mean, in this line of work, if you're not an optimist, you won't go really far. But I think there are definitely a lot of ideals that I hold. But I have two kids, a 5-year-old, 1-year-old, 5-year-old kid looking forward to go to government school. Probably will start out in like government Chinese school and then transition just to be able to get language and then go into a government school. Um, but
Okay.
I'm definitely an optimist, seeing that I think the hope that we have for education is hinged a lot on how much we get involved. So if we're just kind
Mm,
of like sitting on the back seat and like I hope education gets better, then it's never gonna change, right? But if we are putting our hand to the plow, really asking ourselves what does it take, right? And I'm reflecting a bit of the question of earlier when we talk about like the system and allow me
mm,
to disagree slightly. I mean, if I'm thinking about it, the system in my mind is not one thing. The system is made out of people, many, many different people, and each person has different experiences. There are lots of different microsystems. So if I think about what causes a system to change,
mm.
systems are built to maintain status quo. So it's a huge inertia to really want to be able to see systems change, because there's a whole bunch of like syndication, getting people on board, getting people aligned to the same vision. And often, that's why in Malaysia we do see a lot of political will kind of like influencing system change. But I'd say that's kind of very short term, because political will oftentimes it's one term at a time, right? Because everyone's trying to build a certain legacy within their one term. But if I want to ask the question about how do systems really change, right? And if we want to start seeing an education system that's transforming, I think it really the question I'd be asking is like, what sort of change are we measuring? Like change in whose mindsets, right? What sort of outcomes are we measuring? What are we banking on? Are we looking at changes from a facade infrastructure? Are we changing the way we're measuring student outcomes, or really the purpose of education? Is it to be just preparing kids to get good grades, or is it really on preparing talent that would really drive the future of the nation and our country, right? And because I'm an optimist as well, I'd like to think I may be idealistic and maybe like a bit naive as well, but I'd like to think that everyone in any sort of policy making arm are usually doing their best. I don't know if anyone, okay, I won't speak for everybody. I don't know if anyone intentionally creates a policy that is going to like be bad, right? Because at that point, there's this thought about, hey, this is a good idea. But maybe a lot of the time it's not fully informed, right? Or a lot of the time policies maybe not taking enough of like the information or implementation parts on the ground. And if I think about policy as well, I think a lot of it is always with good intention. So if I think about abolishing examinations, right?
Hmm.
there there are good intentions to why we want to abolish examinations. On one hand, exams at a 10-year-old for a kid sitting for what was that test? I forgot what that test is. So UPSR and then and PMR, I think all of those was abolished. So for a 12-year-old kid, does UPSR really, I don't know, do you really get segregated or segmented or
Mm.
streamlined at such a young age? And I think in some countries, our neighboring country, a little bit down south, um, the results you get at 12-year-old can actually influence the kind of junior college you go to. Um, and in Malaysia, I think it's not necessarily that way, and that's a good thing in a sense. But I do feel then, as you abolish examinations, then then comes an entire array of anxiety because now parents have actually no idea, is my son doing well in school? Is my daughter doing well in school? I don't know. The teacher says okay, right? TP bagus lah, TP 3, TP 4. But parents have no way of really knowing, right? And it makes parents anxious as well because parents grew up in ABC system, right?
Mm.
Where if you get a B, then like, hey, do better, right? Because that's the Asian mindset. But actually, really thinking about how are we educating and bringing people along in that journey. And I think as I think about system change, I think it's really a collective responsibility. Yes, I would put a lot of influence and responsibility on like lawmakers or politicians, but actually it's really like the clerk in the school. Do they believe that their role is really important, down to the teacher in the most rural area, or even a parent that's part of the PIBG holding the school accountable for what they want to see their kids achieving? So it is very much this collective responsibility that I feel sometimes in Malaysia, it's much easier to say like, hey, that person needs to take the responsibility, right? And so like, yeah, some thoughts I have.
Mr. Optimism, well said.
Yep.
But it's true,
You
you're
gotta have you
optimistic. Yeah.
gotta have optimism. If not,
No, no, no,
you
I feel
if
you,
not, we
man. I
would have
feel you,
left.
bro.
Yeah.
To be
Mm.
honest, this is when you meet realists, people who are just downright like these are the ways, these are the order, you cannot change, blah 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 blah. There's a novelty behind this, because um, the only thing that the superpowers of humanity is actually to hope.
To
So
dream.
to dream,
Mm.
to hope, to see a way to see a light in the end of the tunnel. And the way you said it, and it's the same for you, Taufik. Like there's a reason why people like you are in this specific place and the role that you embody to pursue real purpose. And without the both of you and many others alike, there's bound to um, there's bound to be people who are looking for some kind of acknowledgement that there are people who are trying the very best they can, whether if it takes a month, a year,
Yeah.
10 years, a century. That's just how the chain of evolution. It depends and like you said, Tawfiq, the will of the people who are responsible for ensuring the educational system gets to where it needs to be.
Mm.
Uh, Now, again, we from the questions I'm reading, there's a lot of frustration that you can hear from
Mm.
the people, because a lot of people, and that shows that they care, they really care. And I do not know how much of an appetite it is for the current, whether it's the opposition or the current government, has to really who really want to make a change, because all I hear is about we're fighting over who should be having the power. I don't see people trying to talk about more level-headed on who are we want to see them do the work. I guess that's the message that people are trying to say, because they don't really see it, or they don't feel the people that they have thought would do the change that they really need. So um, I want to get because we've gone abroad an hour, and I hope you guys are okay with just another 10 more minutes, if that's fine.
All good,
Right.
all good. Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
great.
So when we talk about the equity of our education now, we can we agree that it's down to the point where the change makers, who are the people who are sitting, that dictates the system, they're the ones we are really trying hard to get them to understand that reformation is required, but where it is acceptable on the
Mm.
due process. So of course we're not going to go all the way to advanced like Sweden or whatever, whichever country that you want to model yourself. But there has to be some degree of change that people can see, because right now it's just hearsay, we say kind of thing. So do you guys agree on that?
I
Ken,
I
Ken wants to say something. We want to hear you,
I
man. This is what it's all
uh,
about, bro.
yeah, yeah, I got lots of things to say. I mean, one thing to just echo, I do feel change makers or lawmakers or politicians do have a lot of influence, but I think it comes down to really every Malaysian feeling that they have a say, right? So if I just take the basic example of like democracy and voting, right? The responsibility of every Malaysian to go to the ballot table just to put your vote down, and that can influence. I mean, in the past 5 years, never before have we seen a change in government. So, I mean, it's democracy at play. Whether or not stability and all that is another kind of like thing. But I do feel the responsibility of it lies not just with politicians or lawmakers. I feel there is equal responsibility that lies with community leaders, that leaders in school, to not kind of say like, oh yeah, I'm just following orders from above, but really thinking critically, what does my context, what does my school, what does the child really need on the ground, right? And
Yeah,
how can I play a part in really pushing this system forward, right? And the part I feel, and it's part of Teach for Malaysia's vision as well, like how do we really empower students? And as I think about students, I'm thinking like voting age now is 18, right? So actually 15, 16, 17-year-old, you need people to be really thinking critically and understanding politics in a way that they know who to vote for when they get to 18 years old, right? And that comes down to also like how are students empowered to understand the responsibility they play, and they're not just a receiver in
Mm.
education, but they play a crucial role to participate, to engage, to dialogue, to be able to tell adults, right? There was this case in Sabah, students suing a teacher for not going to school for 7 months. I'm like, in my mind, it's ridiculous. Like, how can a teacher not go into school for 7 months? How is that even possible, right? It happens, but they won that case. And the student's voice is really important. I feel we should give students the platform to really, because I mean sometimes it's us as adults kind of deciding like, oh, we should be teaching this in school or whatever, but actually with all said and done, like students are the ones that are going to be charting the future. If they're not given the empowerment and the voice right down to the school level, how do we expect them to be vocal when they come out into the working world or adult world, right? You talked about pitching, you talked about confidence and stuff like that. It's a lot of these things. I think some of us we only hear about it when you start working or when you go to university,
Mm.
right.
and I think there's so much more to be done in really empowering students. And when I think about the role in, really shifting education, I think it's a lot of it is really the voice, and about the little things that can happen. So if changes can happen at a classroom level in one corner of Malaysia, there are examples of really rural schools in Sarawak that they are speaking amazing English. They're doing astronomy at a primary school level, and these are bright spots, right, that we want to see around. So I do feel if we start kind of taking responsibility that education is something that we can contribute and do, like, yeah, policymakers, whatever color your shoes, doesn't matter, but
Yeah,
right at our school level, let's start thinking about how can we hold teachers accountable, how can we participate in PIBG, how can we have
yeah,
conversations with schools, or even play a part as a parent. I think now a lot of teachers complain that parents just drop their kids off at school and hope that they will come back a better person, right? I feel that that's also putting too much responsibility on teachers, right? Because as a parent, I have a role to play. I have a role to play in terms of developing, confidence in my child, their ability to speak. So I think as a nation or as a system, we will progress when everyone starts asking the question, not whose responsibility is it, but actually what is my own responsibility and how can I contribute, right? Can I volunteer? Can I donate? Can I, join an advocacy campaign? Can I you know, ask my company to donate CSR dollars or whatever, or even like, I don't know, go into civil service or really think about the path less traveled. I think that's when we will start seeing systems change. Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Kenny, you sound like you should be on the side where Taufik is, because there you sound.
I
Where's
guess
his
so.
voice?
That's
Yes.
true.
I, I will let Taufik share his thoughts now. But when Taufik said when he graduated from SPM, I suddenly had this realization like, oh shit, he's so young. Ooh.
But
Yeah, I
Taufik,
mean,
you want to add? Yeah, you want to add on to
yeah.
that?
Ideally, politicians or lawmakers need to listen more. They need to listen to the stakeholders. They need to listen to the teachers, the parents, PIBGs, examination board and whatnot. So they need to listen more. When they listen more, and they will bring up the improvement or the suggestions from them, the stakeholders, bring up to the house, to the parliament, and make the necessary change. And that is where the change can be affected directly towards the students, towards all of us. And the parents will be happy, the teachers will be happy, a lot of our stakeholders will be happy because we can see the real change there. But reality is not happening. It's just the other way around. The other way around where the politicians building up their own narrative and they put up and they embedded to all of us. They're gonna say some years they're gonna say that English is very important and to put it in the math and science. But another years when they have a different leaderships, they say that no, we need to put a Malay in math and science and whatnot. So that is where the politicians, the lawmakers need to listen more. And listening is not something that is outdated. You when you be a leader, you need to listen more. You need to listen to stakeholders. You need to listen what is the real crux of the issues that is happening, and that's where you can solve it. If you cannot solve it on the ground, and if this is related to the policy, that's where you can change it. That is the parts where lawmakers need to do, and actually they need to do they don't need to wait for another years. They can just do it now, where the person who have the responsibility towards a certain some sort of a segment. That's where you need to make sure that okay, it's about time for me to listen more and what is the real issues, and if you need my what can I do to help you to ease your work when it comes to policies, when it comes to enforcement and whatnot. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, look, you're being real, man. Like these are things that people don't want to really, I guess, um, address straight to the point. Whomever is responsible have have the key to unlock the possible changes for the
Mm.
system itself in the education system. I I think they hold the future. And I feel like you are taking that future away from the possibilities
Mm.
that we can do with our current state of our public and schools and universities. Um, now, we had a lot of conversation today. A lot of them do add um, not just value, but something to think about. For those who are viewers, a lot. And like I said, there's been real frustration from the questions that I managed to gather from our viewers. And there's some more that, but I just didn't have the time to kind of get back to them because you were already addressing them one by one. And I appreciate for the both of you for doing so. Um, I'd love to extend more on this conversation, but I think the case has been made.
Mhm.
The both of you are playing major, major roles. From advocating youth to see the real path. Like we say in Islam,
Mm.
al-araq siratul mustaqim. So, and it's the same for you, Ken. You're doing what you guys do at TFM, and knowing the fact that next week is TFM week,
Mm.
is another way to, celebrate your whether it's an anniversary or your achievement, your milestones, and it needs to keep going on, because at the end of the day, we both are hanging on to, like you said, dreams and hopes, and let's not hope the majority of our people don't feel fatigued, because one of our person who asked the question, they're feeling jaded now. That's kind of
Mm.
alarming. We really wanna, if that is true, if the majority feels jaded, then there needs to be someone to bring their energy up again, someone who could really look forward and really feel that real equity for education is actually coming in our lifetime. But it doesn't matter. Even if I'm 80 years old and I finally see it coming to fruition, I'll be goddamn happy.
Mm.
But you one of you want to say something, or I heard a sigh just now.
I'm always on the I'm always on the go, but I do want to
Okay,
I
good,
do
good,
want
good.
to say um I really am encouraged by young people, and I'm half young. Okay, I'm really encouraged by young people really taking up the challenge, and I think it's absolutely crucial for the country, right? And I think as we think about starting off our career, so I let me do a little plug, right? So when I first heard about Teach for Malaysia all the way back in 2011, I think 2010 or 11, I remember hearing about this like idealistic group of young people that think they can change the system, right? And I thought, I was a young working professional working in a corporate accounting firm. I thought like, oh, great, that's great, but the system's not really going to change, or not really going to, and I was quite pessimistic at that time, right? But I think conversations that I had was like, in 5 or 10 years time, when you really think about where our education system has grown or what has happened, which side of the bench do you want to be on, right? Do you want to be on the side that's complaining but actually never did anything about it? Then you have actually no right to complain. The same way we say, if you didn't vote, you can't complain who's in power, right?
Mm.
Or do you want to
Mhm.
be on the side that I did something, I put my hand to the plow, I went down on the ground. And I think I want to invite as many young people as possible to really be thinking about, like, how do you gain experience, how do you find solutions to very complex challenges. I want to put it very nuanced, right? It's not easy sometimes. Public opinion, left and right, both sides also may seem appealing, both sides may also be wrong, but I think a lot of it comes to like, how grounded are we in our experience. And I think for a lot of what we believe in Teach from Malaysia, we want graduates, young professionals to be coming in to understand, empathize with teachers, with the challenge, with the system itself, to then be thinking longer term, actually, what's it really going to take, right? If you've never taught before, it's very, very hard to be able to understand what teachers go through, or understand actually what complexities do students face, right? And so I think I have this aspiration, I mean, for Teach from Malaysia, that hopefully an alumni that has taught in a school for 2 years would one day become a politician and be the Minister of Education. I don't know,
Yo.
in 20 years time, right? But I think the idea here is that we really do need very grounded people with experience, and also developing leadership that can really find the solutions that we may not have today, because a lot of these answers are things that we're continually going to be talking about, right? So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
I
of course.
believe a lot in the youth, and I just want to encourage a lot of people. Our applications are open for 2024, so please apply for Teach for Malaysia, the
All right, so
fellowship.
you're recruiting as well. I definitely would
Absolutely.
approve that as well, because we need more people like you.
Great.
There's someone asking a question that we kind of address, and this person L, is saying it's easier than done, but why can't we just emulate the education system of our neighbors down south? It's the reason. Well, I think our brother Taufiq Zarak has pretty much made it clear. It's the political will, or the will of the people who are having the system as the key for the change. So as unless they are, who doesn't want to be like, we can aspire to be what we want to be within all versions of our neighbors down south. But
Mm.
again, that decision is downright down to, like you said, Taufik. It's down for those guys who have the key to make that change. But going back to Ken again, for those who are just watching, we've been discussing about this for over than an hour now. Because this topic is, like I said, even if I had someone like KJ on board or someone like Sai Sabi, we can go all the way until I'm 50 years old, bro. Because this is an endless mountain of God knows what, hoping that things will do come. And then I think a lot of people are passionate about this topic. One thing worth noting, like the former CEO of TFM is actually working with, correct me if I'm wrong, Ken Ming, he's working in Indonesia very closely with the Minister of Education in Indonesia. And if you know the Minister of Education of Indonesia now, he was the former co-founder of Gojek, right? Am I right? Right.
Yes,
So
yes, correct.
that's the type of, um, you know, how do you say this? Uh, um, Pardon my French, but very ballsy but powerful, solid move to do. I would say, like all of a sudden giving it to the hand of someone who's younger who would understand on how to change. I do not know what the impact has been done on that far, but and we kind of, like you said, Ken, we aspire to have someone to be able to do so. Maybe Zamir will come back to become the Minister of Education. You never know. But or
If he's listening, please do, Zam. We're not taking any other way. But yeah, yeah.
but yeah, but that's when your roles, the roles that Taufik is playing, it's crucial. Like maybe it's just the beginning, I would say. But at the end of the day, the question still remains. How 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 much can we invoke the change that we want to have an equity, the right kind of equity within our education system where it benefits every single one. Not having to worry about sending our kids to a private school anymore because our public school is damn good. That kind of aspiration is what we want. Teachers getting paid very much better, and by doing so, it gives quality for them to teach. All these little things. Those are some of the aspirations that I like to see one day. The public school should be top one. It should be
Yep.
invested properly. It should be done properly. Um, and now, yeah, and I don't, I just don't like to see that. People are just moving towards the private spectrum simply because it will cause another disparity. It will cause
Mhm.
another gap. It
True.
will cause another isolation. I would say. Already with the Sekolah Jenis is somewhat doing so in a different, to a certain degree, but but the way I see it, to have more private schools with public schools, you're just, the gap will show
Mm.
that people with money, obviously, and you have people with, mid income or B40 guys, how, they're, then you are not in touch with reality anymore in that sense.
Yep.
You can definitely see that coming. um but before we end our stream, I just want to give an opportunity again. There's plenty of opportunities here. Like I said, this is an open canvas. Feel free to share what you believe should be preached. Is there anything that you'd like to end on a high note on our stream today, touching on our topic, for both of you, Ken and Tawfiq? I'll start with Ken first, and then Tawfiq, you can help wrap up the show.
Yeah. Firstly, just thank you so much for the opportunity to, I guess, discuss something which is very close to my heart. And I think what I do want to say is that I think it's important for us to not feel discouraged, um, and to really like explore again and again, like what can we do as we think about and as we dream about a better Malaysia. And I think there's so many things that we'd want for our country, right? I mean, we want the ringgit to be stronger so we can go and travel. We want a transparency. We want a better education system. I think there's so many things that we can dream about for our country, and I want to encourage a lot of us to not stop dreaming, but don't stop there, right? And I think it's important to really have aspirations, but also really think about what actions am I taking to contribute, because I really do strongly believe that like there is change happening, right? And I think as we talk a lot about equity, I feel a lot of I guess excitement around people just coming in and really addressing this issue. And I think it's probably a conversation that, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have heard that commonly, right? People really thinking about, how are we closing this gap? What are the issues? What are the opportunities? And I think we do need to have more and more discussion around it to really build that awareness that there is something that we want to address, that, one day all children, will have that opportunity regardless of where they are born. And I think that's
Mm,
something that we all have a responsibility to do. So yeah,
Thank you
thank
so
you
much,
yeah.
for
man.
the platform.
That's great, man. Of course, aspirations, those are very important. Keeping it alive, how to keep it alive, that's on down to your own actions on how you would like to aspire and then make that to work. Taufiq, what do you have to say?
Yeah. Number one, education is not business. Healthcare is not business. So I think all of us need to make sure that these are the investments that we need to put without us expecting a revenue in monetary in return. Education is very, very important for all of us, for our next generations, to make sure that they all have the access to it. Um, wh- I wish that maybe after my time, there will be a moment where no one left behind when it comes to educations, and with regards to accessible of getting an education, so why not everyone have the access to it, and everyone have the opportunity, have the same opportunity regardless the backgrounds. um, there will be a phase. Don't lose hope. We need to make sure, and we need to keep our interest in learning new things, getting in educations. We need to keep that interest burning to make sure that um, you know uh, it's for our own good, and it's for our own benefit, to get experience, to to learn new things, and for all of us to survive in this very challenging world. So um, perhaps one day we can see all of Malaysians. The mindset is no longer about race, it's no longer about religions. All of us are Malaysians, and at that time, I would say, education is very, very, very close to our heart, where the government must put a very top priority, and to make sure that there will be a keep changing reform, or transform in terms of that relates to the current environment. So yeah, thank you for the opportunities, and keep and all of us, I mean, like especially TFM, keep inspiring a lot of students, keep inspiring. I mean, I also kind of like wanted to be a teacher, to be in TFM. Yeah, so thank you,
Boleh.
TFM, thank you. Yeah.
Ole, he's
Boleh.
recruiting.
Boleh.
Yeah, okay.
But hey, look, I just want to also give a shout out to those who've been listening. Thank you, MK. And the MK saying thank you for sharing and for staying positive, much needed. FM is saying thank you for great sharing. Learned a lot. Thank you, L, and thank you, Chris, and thank you, Eric Van Elster, for all your lovely questions. And don't forget to again donate to TFM down here. And if you're on Milia Insights app, feel free to donate your points to TFM. Again, a wonderful, huge thanks to Zarak. I always mix because Zarak is very, very upside down, bro.
Yeah, it's a unique skill.
Yeah, very unique. It's good. It's good. Yeah. At least it's not the other Zarak, Okay, but again, thank you so much, Zarak, Taufiq Zarak, for joining us. Such a huge pleasure to hear from yourself. Extremely insightful and very inspirational as well in terms of what you are trying to incite in a positive way. Because we're called incitement. We incite positives. And again, Ken Ming, thank you for being a great. You're not just any substitute to your CEO. You're beyond that. You should aim for his seat when he comes back. So again, Ken Ming, when you have the time, feel free to come to headquarters.
Yeah.
Join the side of Taufiq because you have the burn in you, bro. You have the fire in you to invoke real change. So do it
Mm.
for your kids.
Hopefully.
So you have it in you.
Well, I
So
mean,
yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you, boys. Thank you so much for
Thank
being
you,
part of
guys.
Thank
We
you.
had a
Thank you
good
for having.
time, and I'll see you again when we have that time in the very near future. So, this is Zikry, your host for It Matters. Have a nice, good evening, guys.